As we quickly approach set championships for Ursula's return, it is important to consider what decks we should run when attending these events. Now, these events are very meta heavy, and it's important to consider your deck thoroughly before attending. When you're considering what deck to bring, you should really consider what the meta is going to look like around your area and what deck you feel most comfortable with. So over the next few videos, I'm going to be bringing you some decks that I would suggest running in these set championships. In a meta that is heavily dominated by Ruby Amethyst and Emerald Steel, it is first important to consider how much of these we expect to see at our set championships and if we expect to see any outliers. Now, in my area especially, Ruby Amethyst is the more popular, but it is a split between these two. So the first deck I do want to introduce you guys to that I would recommend playing is going to be a deck that I think can play well into both of these matchups and potentially catch a lot of people off guard, as I believe that these two will be the most heavily played decks going into set championships. So the first deck I'm going to recommend running in your set championships is going to be Sapphire Steel. The reason I suggest Sapphire Steel in these matchups is because Sapphire Steel runs very well into both Ruby Amethyst and Emerald Steel. I know a lot of people would say that it probably doesn't have the best matchup in Ruby Amethyst, but at my recent locals, I finished in second and I only lost to an Emerald Steel. And I did face two Ruby Amethysts in the way there. So I think if you run this deck, this current build, you shouldn't struggle as much into the Ruby Amethyst game. But I do also think that if you run the generic wheel Sapphire Steel, that you can still beat that matchup. It's just dependent on if your opponent can get the Flynn Sisu combo early in the game. But anyway, getting into this deck list, because I think this is a really solid deck list for anyone that wants to catch people off guard at their set championships. So to begin, I would recommend running two of Argyle. Now, this card is there because this card can counter Flynn very well, especially if Sisu's on the board and you can manage the cards that you have in hand and get down to 3. This card can prevent Flynn from gaining any lore from any of the cards that it has out there, including Madam Mim, as well as swinging into castle and being able to take half of its life in one turn. And if your opponent wants to go ahead and take out Argyle, they're probably going to have to trade in order to do that. You can maybe bump Argyle up to 3 or 4, just dependent on if you wanted to cut a few of the other cards throughout the deck. Like if you wanted to cut the wheel completely, I could see that going up to 4 Argyle, but for now I want to keep it at 2. Moving on to Mr. Smee. Mr. Smee is a no-brainer for me. You have to be running him in a steel deck just because he does quest for 2, and he is a bigger body that can trade, especially after he's already taken a few damage. I've noticed that at my locals when I play Mr. Smee on the board, a lot of my opponents will go ahead and maybe do an unfavorable trade just to get him off the board. I did switch over from my past Sapphire Steel deck that I posted about a week or 2 ago from one jump to Mickey Mouse. This is just because I think Ruby Amethyst is going to be very dominant at these set championship events, and you want an extra body on board for when they're going to play Be King Undisputed or anything like that, or like Lady Tremaine, so that you can choose Mickey over maybe a favorable target like Belle. So Mickey is there to do the one jump ahead, but also to have a body on board that you can maybe just keep there and maybe don't use him to quest to do anything with, just so that when they do eventually hit you with a Tremaine or a Be King Undisputed, you can sacrifice the Mickey instead of sacrificing something more favorable. I did go with 3 Bells. You could probably cut this down to 2 if you wanted to, and add in another card like Argyle or Tinkerbell. I would run 4 Tinkerbells. This is just my current deck that I am running, and I don't have the last Tinkerbell. So 3 Bells, I think she's a really good dime target, and I think that I would rather her than Ariel. I know Ariel has Ward, but if I already have my dime down, her costing 4 instead of 6 sometimes can really help you and will allow you to play Belle and use the dime on the same turn. Obviously, 4 Hirams are there for the draw engine. This card is insanely useful and definitely a card that I would recommend keeping no matter what. In this deck, it's a no-brainer. You need this card. 4 Cogsworth, really good. Lots of people, especially in my locals, forget that he has Ward. So if you're taking him to set champs, please remember he does have Ward. Don't let your opponent do anything to him. And then realize, 2-3 turns later when you can't really do anything about it, please make sure you realize he has Ward and he gives all of your other characters resist 1. So if an opponent makes a bad move over the weekend, I do not blame you if you do not want to let them take that back, especially since there's a big card on the line. And then 2 of the 5 drop Beast Hard-Headed. You could replace this for Tragic Cure if you wanted to. He's just really good in the mirror at taking out your opponent's Quill if you need to later on in the game. One of those Ariels, really good dime target, has Ward, hard to get rid of. And if, say you're 10 away and you can afford to wait 2 turns and you have a dime out there, you don't even have to exert. You could just dime her twice to win the game. Then we have 3 Tinkerbells. Would love to bump her up to 4. If I could get another one before my set champs, I probably will bump her up to 4 and cut something like a maybe cut like a Baboom or something like that. But 3 Tinkerbells, she's awesome. She also forces your opponent to really consider what they're going to do if you have her out there, because if you can attack something and deal 2 damage somewhere else, I find opponents are not questing because she's out there. 4 Tamatoa, I would never cut this card. I think it's a big issue, especially for Ruby Amethyst. When you play this card, they have to do something. They have to either be prep, Maleficent, whatever they choose to do. They have to deal with it, and they have to deal with it very quickly, or you will win the game. In my recent matchup at Locals, I did end up winning against the Ruby Amethyst player solely because they could not take care of my Tamatoa. 1 Fire the Cannons, you could cut a Baboom for a Fire the Cannons and go over the even split. I just wanted the Babooms because they are inkable. So Baboom and Fire the Cannons, pretty much there for the same thing. Babooms are better though because they can hit locations, so that's another reason why you might want to have 3 instead of 2, but honestly for me it was just for the inkability. 2 Rise of the Titans, great card. You could run Avalanche if you want, but again, inkability is really, really important. I went for 3 in the long game Zeus. I know a lot of people are on 2 or even 1 of this card, but this card is so good, and the fact that you can sing it with Bella Hiram if you need to, this card is just insane value. I have 1 Let It Go. I'm not a huge fan of this card. It gives your opponent power as well as removing a card, so it's a win and a loss in my opinion. I do have 2 of the wheel. Now, you could cut the wheel fully if you're confident in cutting the wheel fully. I have the wheel there because in the Ruby Amethyst match, it can be very, very good because you can wheel away those B preps. Like I said, over the weekend when I played the Ruby Amethyst player, I did get all 4 of her Be Prepareds while just using a whole new world. So it's definitely something that I would recommend maybe keeping. I'm probably going to cut it down to 2 for my set champs though, just because I want to play more consistent into other matchups. And I feel like against Emerald Steel, you don't really need to wheel because your opponent's going to be at 1 card in their hand at some point. And Emerald Steel's a really slow deck. If you can just ping what they have on board and then build your own board state, you will win the game. 3 Grab Swords, such a good card. Literally destroys Emerald Steel's players, can destroy their entire board, especially if they are a little cocky and they decide to go double bookie, and then by then you can hit 5 and you grab swords and just punish them. It's insane. Grab Swords is insane. Obviously, we have the 8 Popsicles, 4 Fortis Spheres, 4 Popsicles, same thing. 4 Fishbone Quill there for the ramp, and 2 Lucky Dime. So ideally, you want to get the dime out as soon as you can because it will win you the game later on. But I think this deck is very, very, very good for set champs. I think it will play very well into Emerald Steel. It always has. And I think if you use some of these tech cards such as Argyle and Rise of the Titans and slow down a Ruby Amethyst player, you can win the game there as well, just by getting those high questers out there with the dime and just closing the game out before they can. I definitely think this is one deck that I would definitely recommend playing. This is the deck that I'm probably going to recommend playing because my area is full of Emerald Steel and Ruby Amethyst. But I do have a couple more deck techs to go over in the next coming days. But I do want to just go over a quick mulligan guide for this deck and show you guys what I would keep in an ideal starting hand. On Dreamborn, and you can just literally mulligan here. So if I started with this hand and I wouldn't know what my opponent is playing, I probably would keep the 1-drop item. I'd probably keep the Mickey. I'd be hesitant to keep the songs going into an Emerald Steel matchup. You really don't want that. I'm gonna get rid of the dime because it's not good to us this early on. I'm gonna get rid of the Beast, and I'm gonna get rid of both the songs. I'll keep the Popsicle, I'll keep the Mickey, and I'll keep the Cogsworth just because if the Cogsworth ends up being useless, at least now it's ink. And now this hand is actually pretty decent because you can turn 1 Popsicle, ink something like the Tamatoa probably, and then Popsicle. And then turn 2, you can see what your opponent's playing. If they're playing Ruby Amethyst, you might want to smack down the Mr. Smee just to race with the Flynn, or if they decide to go ahead and play the Flynn, you can take them out with the Baboom, going into a turn 3 Mickey and a turn 4 Cogsworth that can then sing the Grab Swords, and then you can establish your board better from there. So that is definitely a good hand. This I would say is a pretty ideal hand I would want for going into a game. It would even be decent against a Emerald Steel player because vice versa, you could just ink Tamatoa, Popsicle, Baboom's there for the Diablos, and Mr. Smee's there challenge that board, and then once you get Cogsworth out there, it's very, very easy as well. So that is definitely an ideal hand that I would recommend. Alrighty, and now to end today's video, I just wanted to go over again why I would recommend running this deck to set champs. So this deck is a very, very good deck to run to set champs, and depending on what your meta looks like, if your meta is anything like my meta around me, which is just Emerald Steel and Ruby Amethyst, I would highly recommend considering playing this deck first to set champs. This is the deck that, again, I am most likely going to play, just because I think it's got really good matchups into the other decks. I know a lot of other meta decks, I know a lot of people have said that, it struggles against the Ruby Amethyst. I think with a few tech cards, it won't struggle as much into the Ruby Amethyst match. It can win even with bad hands. You can start out with a terrible hand, but as long as you get a Tomato and a Dime, you can win the game. And I do think it's going to catch a lot of people off guard. I don't think they're going to have prepared for Sapphire Steel matchups. I think most people are going to be preparing for playing against Ruby Amethyst and playing against Emerald Steel. So I think Sapphire Steel is definitely a great deck to play. Now, there are definitely different variations of this deck, and I definitely want to give them a quick shout out as well. So I will go over a couple other variations of this deck you could use. Very quickly before we end, as I said, I wanted to touch on some of the other Sapphire Steel builds you could run. This is more of a generic Sapphire Steel build you could run. This was the one in my other video. If you guys haven't seen that, I go into more detail about how to play that deck and an in-guide deck guide on how to do that. So if you like the look of this deck more, go ahead and check that deck guide out. And then the last build I wanted to touch on just a little bit is going to be Alphos' deck from Bokum. If you guys don't know who Alphos is, he is a great Disney LORCANA content creator, and I will make sure to have his channel in the description as well. But this is his deck that he took to, I believe, the content creator set champs over in the UK, and then he took it to Bokum. This is a very good deck as well. I know that he also said that he would maybe consider cutting Jafar for Argyles. As you can see, he's fully cut the wheel. He's got the 7-drop Simba. He's got the Hades. So this is a deck you could play as well. He, of course, does not run any Zeuses and stuff like that. That's why I didn't go with this one, and I don't have the 3 Tragic Hero Beasts. So this is definitely a deck that you could run. This is his version of it, and I really do like his version of it as well, and would definitely like to give it a try sometime. So make sure you guys check out Alphos' deck and his channel that I will go ahead and tag below. Okay, guys, there you have it. This is the first video of the decks I would recommend for running at set championships. I will make sure to put the description of the deck list down below for Dreamborn and all the other decks I've shown as well. I will make sure to tag the creators of those as well. So thank you guys for watching so much. We are approaching 100 subscribers, so I will probably be announcing the giveaway and how to enter in the next video. But I appreciate all the love and support, and I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.